morning. Yesterday was day 6 of the Karen Read trial, and our friend Jen McCabe took the stand. And thank God that girl got highlights, because I was so tired of you guys talking about how much we look like. Anyway, if you listen closely, you'll see she brought up 4 new things in this testimony that I've never heard her talk about before. And they were little breadcrumbs that are trying to tie together the prosecution's case. And, you know, she sows seeds with the jury, but let's see on cross today, I'm hoping it's Jackson, let's see if somebody on the defense team caught it, and we'll call her on it. Now, she was on the stand for well over an hour. I just want to focus on the time where she was talking about the morning they went and found John, right? It starts at 4:53 in the morning when she receives a hysterical call. Karen has John's niece call Jen McCabe because Karen doesn't have her phone number. All along, Jen has sworn that that call was just Karen screaming, Jen, I can't find John. And then basically kind of hanging up, right? Like she's just completely hysterical. Now, Jen says that during that first call, Karen says a couple of critical things. She says, we had an argument and I left him at Waterfall. So that's what Jen is establishing that Karen says to her in that first call. Now, first, that sets up the stage that they had an argument, because up until now, no one has any proof that they argued in the car. The argument is the reason she's accused of killing him. But if no one can substantiate any argument, then what's her motive? So Jen is trying to establish that by saying, oh, Karen told me they had an argument. Here's the other thing. When she said, I left him at Waterfall, this gives Jen the alibi for calling Julie Albert that morning. See, it's always been weird. Jen plays some calls. She plays calls. She says, and she admits this on the stand. She called John. She says she called Tom Beatty, who's a neighbor friend, who's a friend of John's, who lives close to the Alberts, who was supposed to come to the party that night and didn't. Called his daughter. No one answers the phones, right? She calls her sister, Nicole, which makes sense because if Nicole answered, she'd be like, hey, is John there? And then she calls Julie Albert. And it's never made sense why she called Julie Albert. But the reason that's important is because Julie Albert, in her very first statement, all the way back at the beginning, she was asked, when did you find out? Like, when did you hear, or how did you hear that John had died? And she said, well, I found out when Jen called me that morning. Well, when you pull the phone records and you realize that call happened at 5 a.m., the questions start happening of, well, wait a minute. Jen was calling you at 5 a.m. to tell you John was dead when we didn't know that yet? So that always seemed fishy. Fishy enough that when Julie went in front of the grand jury, the story changed. Oh, no. Oh, no. I misspoke. It's wrong in the police statement. I actually didn't find out until 8:30 when I took donuts over to the Albert home, and that's when they told me. But Jen needs a reason for calling Julie, because it looks suspicious that she called Julie. Why? Julie and Chris weren't at the party. Julie and Chris Albert were not at the party. They were at the Waterfall, but they went home. But guess what? They're the parents of Colin Albert. So it kind of looks like the 5 a.m. call was a heads up to be like, shit, starting, get ready, make sure Colin sticks to his story. Click. She's never been able to justify why she called Julie. Now, here's the thing. They both say that the call wasn't answered and they didn't talk. You would think Jen would have left a voicemail. If nothing else than to say, you guys live the closest to John, because they do. They live like next door, kitty corner from John. So you guys live the closest. Can you please go over to his house and calm Karen down and look in that house and make sure John's not home? So that would be a good reason for calling them, but Jen doesn't use that reason. She uses the reason that Karen said, I left him at the Waterfall. So Jen's thinking, okay, he was left at the Waterfall. Who was at the Waterfall when we left? Chris Albert. And Chris stayed there later, so maybe Chris saw John. So her logic on the stand is that she called Julie to see if Chris had seen John at the Waterfall after they all left. But then she says, but then my husband reminded me, don't you remember? John was on his way to Fairview with Karen. And Jen goes, oh, silly me, you're right, because I was texting and calling him when he was in the fucking car. So again, this alibi doesn't stand. She called Julie, I think, to warn Julie that Karen was awake, Karen knew John was missing, it's about to get started, make sure Colin sticks to his story. That is my opinion. The third piece is she established the tail light being broken before 5:07. The defensive strategy has been that Karen's taillight got cracked and was missing a piece or two because when she pulled out of the garage that morning, we have it on ring camera, she hit John's car in the driveway. That was right around 5:07 as she was on her way to the McCabe's house. When they came back to John's house with Carrie and Jen, she pulled into the driveway and it's on ring camera. Just as they're getting ready to leave to go search for John, you see Karen showing the two ladies the broken taillight. Okay, that's all established on ring camera. Jen goes on to testify that in the second phone call, Karen mentioned to her that she had a broken taillight. And by the other timeline, that taillight isn't broken yet. Karen hasn't pulled out of the garage to hit John's car yet. But according to Jen, Karen told her over the phone that her taillight was broken. And when Karen shows up hysterical at the McCabe house and says, we have to go look for him, we have to go look for him, Jen testifies that her husband Matt says, and I'm quoting this, Matt says, no, you're not going. You can't be driving in this weather with a broken taillight. So both McCabes have established that they knew about the taillight before Karen hit John's vehicle. So this sets up the story that the taillight was already broken and Karen was talking about her broken taillight, which would have had to have happened the night before when she hit John. So that's what they're trying to establish, right? This has never come up before, ever. The whole story has always been the first time Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts found out about the cracked or broken or missing pieces of the taillight was that morning on Ring camera at John's house when Karen showed them, look, I hit his car and look what happened. Now Jen is saying, oh no, I knew, 30 minutes before that when she told me over the phone. And then I'm guaranteeing you, Matt McCabe is going to get up on the stand and testify to the same thing. My wife hung up the phone and told me, oh God, Karen's taillight is broken. Now she also managed to cleverly support Ian Whiffin's testimony just slightly because he had said that John's Apple data gave the appearance he was going up and downstairs just because he was in the car and it was going up and down roads that were hills. Jen, when she's testifying and they're talking about Carrie driving, she keeps saying things like, well, they live at the bottom of the road, which would give you an indication that it's a downhill slope. They live down at the bottom. She says, when we came over the hill. So she's saying words like that in her testimony, very slyly, like, oh yeah, you come over the hill and you see the flagpole. Like she's giving the illusion that there are a lot of hills. Now, there's never ever been reports that any of these roads, any of this route that Karen would have taken, or any of them would have taken to 34 Fairview, involved a lot of going up and down hills. She dangles that in there to help support Ian Whiffin's testimony. And did you happen to notice, like we've all said, I've said this multiple times, that Jen was kind of the ringleader. She was like, you do this, you do this, you do this, let's do this, blah, blah, blah. Like she was always kind of the ringleader. But she goes out of her way to establish Carrie as the ringleader that morning. Carrie is a take charge girl. Carrie is the one that decided we were going to go here or there. And she says Karen was hysterical. Karen couldn't make any decisions. Carrie was telling her to shut up. Carrie was taking charge. Carrie said, let's go here. Carrie said, get in my car. Jen's making it sound like she was just basically along. She grabbed her coffee and went along for the ride. She had nothing to do with this search for John. She had no control over where they were going. She had no idea what was happening. She didn't see anything. It was basically Carrie trying to please Karen by going to the places Karen wanted to go to. Hank Brennan also tried to hit on the shoe thing. Like John had this real fetish about people taking off their shoes before they went into the house. And they've always said, well, Karen killed him because she didn't take off his shoes. She knew he was dead already, so she didn't take off her shoes, so she must be guilty. They hit on that again, which I think is the most benign thing in the world. But Jen made sure to say, I took off my shoes because I know John would kill me if I went in his house with my shoes on. And Carrie took off her shoes because she's good friends with John. She knows John doesn't want shoes in his house. But Karen just traipsed right through the house, dragging the snow in the house. They're saying that Karen already knew John was dead. That's why Karen didn't give a shit about his house rules. Karen's the only one that doesn't seem to know where John is. And she's panicked. She's the only one that's showing really any true concern at this point. And in a panic, she runs in the house with her shoes on. Jen gets crossed today. Let's see how it goes.